friends and painters, welcome to the last, third part of this short series of face painting. In the last part, we started using oil paints, prepared the whites of the eyes for the next steps, painted the inside of the mouth and tongue, and finally painted the base color of the beard. Next day, when the oil layer is dry, I try to paint things around the face. I mean a beard if the bust has one, hair, hats, scarves or other things that are around the face. This will help me choose the right contrast of the face in the next steps. In this case, I choose a medium shade of brown for the beard. I diluted the paint a little and applied one layer to the beard, moustache, and I must not forget the eyebrows. I prepared the chainmail hood with black paint. I'll always choose black before applying metallic paints. You can already see that the face will be in the nice contrast and will not disappear in the dark armor. There is a scar on the left cheek, which I will also focus on during the painting. When painting the beard, I just have to be careful not to ruin the face with brown paint. I added one new color to my palette, the red shade Brown Mother from Winsor & Newton. I like to use this color because it has a nice shade. However, you can replace this color with burnt sienna. And we will jump right in. The next day is always just about contrasts, balance and finishing the basic skin tone. I do not make any major changes. I focus on certain areas of the face, and if necessary, I will finish with more contrasts, more depth, more highlights, more pronounced warm or cool tones, etc. I started right at the nose and its surroundings. I still wanted to achieve more red nose and wrinkles around the nose. I work with a small amount of paint and the flat brush is size 2 with fine bristles. Sometimes I just rub the round brush between my fingers and spread the paint. And here we have the scar on his left cheek. It is plastic, but I still wanted to emphasize the scar. So I started with a darker shade of pink and painted the depth. Then I mixed a light pink by adding white and started painting the edges of the scar. This enhanced the greater depth and plasticity of the scar. For even greater expressiveness, I use a dark shade of red and painted the deepest shadows. It is a tiny head and I wanted to achieve visibility of the scare even from a greater distance. On the other hand, you will find later that the scare will really be invisible. My next step was to add a light shade under the eyes and highlight the wrinkles around the eyes. Again, I work with a small amount of paint and spread the paint directly under the appropriate areas. If I feel that there is too much paint on the surface, I wipe the brush and spread the paint until it disappears. For greater contrast, I do not spread some lines at all with the flat brush. I apply the paint with the round brush and spread it directly under the wrinkles. I also apply a little light color to the wrinkles on the forehead and nose. Then I move to the nose and highlight the tip of the nose and the nostrils. I'm still struggling with the corner of the mouth, how to paint it. I will probably end up painting a bird there. I will highlight the deepest tone a little more, first around the nose and then in the area around the eyes. From the two red tones on the palette, I prepare a dark shade of red which I will use to paint the lips. I will start on the outer edge of the lower lip. Then I will lighten the color with a skin tone and paint the next part of the lower lip. With the lightest shade, I will finish painting the part of the lower lip that is closest to the lower teeth. few more adjustments, and with the skin tone I will paint the vermilion border of the lower lip. This is the border where the lower lip ends and the human skin begins. For some people this line is pronounced. The lips are done and I can move on to the teeth. I will mix a medium grey shade from the colors I have on the palette. With this shade I will start painting the teeth that are visible. I will only apply the color to the teeth. The gaps between the teeth are already done. They were created when I painted the inside of the mouth. I use a dark skin tone and then a dark red shade. I also applied the paint to the teeth unintentionally and the gaps between the teeth. The same goes for the bottom row of teeth. I will apply another layer of paint which is light grey to a smaller area, not to the entire surface of the tooth. The closer I get to the edge of the tooth, the lighter the color. The darkest is at the gums. I paint the tips of the teeth a very light grey, but never white. White is too contrasting and unnatural. Nobody has pure white teeth. We will stay with the white color for now. Let's just move on to the left cheek, specifically to the scar. I thought that if a man has a beard and is injured on his face, he will start to grow white beard around the scar. That the injury will somehow damage the pigmentation on his face. I guess I was wrong, because I couldn't find any photos with the scar and a white beard. On the other hand, it looks cool, so why not? I only painted small lines on the direction of the beard. I started with the light grey and gradually moved into the white. When the white is diluted, it's not as prominent. I think it's a nice variation on the face and it looks really good. It's time to liven up the face. Paint the eyes. I start with the yellow edges, where I paint the shape and placement of the eyes. I paint the line with the brush, which I gradually expand and round. A good brush with a good tip is the basic. I try to always have the iris touch the upper eyelid of the eyes and, if possible, the lower eyelid. Another important thing when painting the eyes is the direction of the gaze. I'll always try to have the eyes look to the side, left, right, never directly in front of the bust. I always check the size of the iris and especially the placement of both eyes. The acrylic base paint is only to help me with the placement and size of the iris. At this stage, everything can still be corrected and adjusted. Of course, almost everything can be corrected, but sometimes it takes more time. For the brown iris, I choose the colors Amber Nature, Cadmium Orange Light, and Bone Black. I will start to lighten the brown color with orange. Please don't ask why I touched the yellow color with a toothpick. By the way, it's a golden ochre. I think I did it automatically. In the next steps, I already used orange. At the end, I added a little white paint. And again yellow. Apparently, the resulting shade was too red, so I used golden ochre. I found a very good brush with a high quality tip. Abteilung 502, top line, size 50 or 40. Sorry, I don't remember anymore and it's not very visible on the camera. By the way, great brushes for oil paints. I will start with the darkest brown color, which I will use to paint the edges of the iris. A small arc on each side of the iris is enough. I will also apply the same shade of brown to the upper part of the iris, right under the upper eyelid. It's the darkest part of the iris. In the attached picture, you can see the dark and light parts of the eye. The dark edge of the iris is also clearly visible. I applied a medium shade of brown just below to the dark shade. I needed the top half of the iris to be dark brown. I always work with a small amount of paint, especially when I'm working on details like the eye. I applied the light shade, in this case a brownish yellow, to the bottom of the iris. Just a tiny amount and just a half circle to create contrast. I'm definitely not trying to make subtle transitions between colors. A little touch up with the dark colors and I can make the lightest part of the iris. I painted a small line with the yellow color right below at the bottom of the iris. Again, contrast and no softening of the colors. In the end, I had to use an even lighter shade. I mixed in white and applied a light yellow shade to the bottom of the iris. It really wants the paint contrast so that the eye on the bust is visible even from a greater distance. A little highlight on the white of the eyes right next to the iris to highlight an even more contrast in the eye. A quality brush with a perfect tip and a small amount of paint. If necessary, after applying the paint, I wipe the brush and slightly spread the paint. I make a lens with black paint right in the middle of the iris. I don't breathe for a moment, I make a black dot and then I breathe out. The same for the other eye. In the same way, I make the reflection of the eye with white paint. Only it doesn't have to be a dot. It can be a line, a dot, a spot, just a white reflection of the eye. The same in the other eye. After this final step, the eyes look alive. The white reflection is caused by the impact of the light source on the moist surface of the eye. When painting eyes, I sometimes manage to apply color to the lower eyelid. That's why I mix a pink shade of paint and apply it to the lower eyelid, right next to the white of the eye. Finally, a brownish red shade to the corner of the eyes. I usually do this step before painting the iris, but now I forgot and I have to finish painting it when the eyes is almost done. That's why I proceed slowly and carefully. I apply the color to the corner and spread it a little. In some people, the other side of the white is also slightly red, really just a little. Let's move from the face to the beard and scare on the left side. I start with the darker shade which I use to paint the beard under the chin. The darkest shade of the beard. Then I look at the shape and movement of the beard which I use to orient myself and apply the darker shade. As I work, I lighten the shade of brown and apply it to the places that are more exposed to the light. Again, the shape of the bird helps me. I spread it gently with a flat brush. It goes very quickly. I don't try to get perfect transitions. After a while, the bird is done for now. I mix a light grey color and move to the bird around the scare on the face. I paint with the oil paint in the same way as I painted with acrylic paint. A light grey shade, a brush with a good tip and one line after another, all in the direction of the bird. Then I add a darker shade of grey, paint the darker parts of the bird without pigments and go back to the white color. I add more and more white color to the grey and get lighter shades, which I add to the bird, one line after another. When I painting the bird, I covered the scar on the face a little. That's why I mix a pink shade and highlighted the scar again. Small amount of color, a good brush and a steady hand. A few more adjustments to the face when I have the colors on the palette and before I move on to the last step. Somewhere to add a little shadow, highlight the eyebrows, somewhere just a line to emphasize and create more contrast. At the last step, I choose to highlight the bird. I use acrylic paint for this. I had to wait until the oil layer dried, which was until the second day, maximum the third day. Don't worry about it at all. It is possible to overlap different types and brands of paints. The previous layer just has to be dry. I paint acrylic paint on the places that are the lightest. This will highlight the bird even more and achieve more contrast. I could have done this step with oil paint, but I wanted to speed up the work and show you that you can apply acrylic paint to oil paint. That's it, the face is finished. I'm glad I painted the face and made the video. From my point of view, this face is very good for practicing face painting. Thank you very much for your time and patience. I hope you enjoy this series. Next time we will paint a whole bust or a figure. Thank you and see you soon.